Chapter 4. Relg? The fuck? How did they get here so fast? Said Kvar, taking a few steps closer. Must have been the Krishish wrench detectors. Better than I thought. Or maybe they were in the area, replied Uli. The red spiral of descent was still high up in the sky, seeming to fall in slow motion. Crimson dust and flakes crumbled off the falling mass and was left suspended in the air, leaving a highly visible trail. No sound could be heard coming from the incoming Relg. Let's go. It looks like they overshot a little bit and are falling to the south. We need to make a run for Dreg, Kvar yelled as he took off running. Run? There's no running from the Relg. There's no escape once they've caught the trail, retorted Uli as he ran alongside Kvar. But I don't have any better ideas, so let's go. We need to get off planet, said Kvar. Easier said than done. I've been trying to get off this hellhole for years. We need to make our way to Dreg. If we are lucky, the Relg will still be a day behind us when we get there. Let's grab some sand speeders, said Uli. Kvar and Uli slid down the last dune, arriving at the camp. Tents were flattened. Shreds of cloth and bits of man were scattered about. Uli moved through the camp solemnly, recognizing the remains of many of his comrades. Well, I never liked them much anyways. I just joined because I was marooned on this planet, and mining is not my thing, said Uli. Both of them rummaged through the remains, looking for a working speeder. Finally, Uli spotted a pair of sand skis underneath one of the tent canvases. He pulled the cloth back to unveil 5 sand speeders in perfect condition. What have you there? Asked Kvar, coming over from a fruitless search. Drag-built Venoms. Top of the line. Auto-redrawing, twice-tightened coils. Brand new treadtails, too. A lot better than riding some piece-of-shit Dugnaki and Skitter. Some luck, huh? Said Kvar as he mounted the speeder and tested the pedals. As he pedaled, the coil-driven dual treadtails pushed the sand backwards in a gust, sending the speeder forward on the main skis. First time on a speeder? Asked Uli, watching Kvar's uneasy movements. Kvar nodded. All right, then. Well, dune riding is pretty simple once you get the hang of it. See that lever on your right? Well, that's what controls the treads. Pull it up to bring the treads out of the sand, push it down to engage them. With the treads down, you'll be able to climb dunes, as long as you keep on pedaling. Do not stop pedaling halfway up a dune. Trust me. So anyways, the trick is to gain as much speed as possible once you get to the top. When you start to go over the crest, pull the lever up, lean forward, and see the true speed of those sand skis. Hold on tight, and you'll get the hang of it. It's quite fun, actually. We better go. Those Relg are halfway to the ground now. They'll land in a few hours. Kvar looked up and saw it was true. During the time they had spent searching, the red comet had spun down much farther. How do you know so much about the Relg? Kvar asked Uli. Kvar only knew rudimentary things about them, for he had never seen them in person. During the Battle of Drezia, the Relg had used a much faster type of pod. Here, though, they were stuck in intergalactic pods, which had a much slower rate of descent. Uli grabbed a few packs and stuffed some canvas, food, and water in them. He tossed one to Kvar. I'll tell you later. We got about a day-and-a-half journey. Let's ride. Kvar launched off and followed Uli as he took off and charged up a huge dune. The first climb became much more difficult at about 3/4 of the way up, but after rounding the top, he pulled the lever and treads up, and with all resistance gone, the skis blasted forward, gaining terrifying speed. Uli was right. It was exhilarating, and he got the hang of it quickly. The 2 riders skittered off into the horizon, while the red comet spun and spiraled, lower and lower. 4 hours later. Pebbles of sand shot upwards into the air as the pod burst into pieces on the soft impact. As the dust and sand settled, fragments of a crimson, web-like material appeared scattered all over. In the center of the plume lay 3 large silver spheres. The harsh desert sun did not reflect off the metallic material, but rather seemed to curve around the spheres, for on the ground, instead of a shadow, were glowing halos. At once, all 3 spheres clicked and began to unfold, with small elongated petal segments expanding outwards in perfect choreography. As the segments were unfolding, the spheres began to rise, and underneath each appeared 2 feet, followed by long, sharp legs covered in the same crystallized crimson web material that had littered the desert nearby. This material bundled in masses along the legs, expanding and contracting as the sphere continued to move and unfold. If one were to look closely, individual strands could be seen tightly bound together in what looked to be muscles. The spheres finished unfolding, and the segment stood as a flower in the air. The being stretched its arms outwards towards the sky, and the metallic segments began to move rapidly and chaotically, pulling pieces down and around the limbs and body of the creature. No more than 15 seconds later, the being was fully covered. As the last segment slid into place, the entire suit changed to a bright red and emitted a dull glow. An archiver could identify this material as Krishirian armor, how few else knew its origins. In unison, the 3 Relg stalkers reached down and picked up metal rods, which extended to the length of the Relg, a full 7 feet. One stalker took a step forward and placed his staff in the sand. He meditated around it, slowly circling it and never leaving contact. Finally, he stopped, looked up, and began walking towards a nearby dune. Without a word, the others followed. At the top of the dune, the 3 stopped and looked out at the desert before them. In the distance, a small stream of black smoke disrupted the monotony of the desert. The 3 hunters set off. After 12 hours of non-stop riding, Uli finally held up his hand and called over to Kvar. The sun had gone down over 2 hours ago, and the sky was now rapidly darkening. "Let's camp here for the night. We made good progress. These are quality speeders," said Uli. "Damn, I wish this planet had a moon so we could keep going. I hate to stop with them on our trail," replied Kvar. "There was one once, apparently, but man tampered with it, and she spun out of orbit or something," Uli said as he pulled the canvas out of the packs. "Kvar, I've been thinking about this most of the ride. Why did you let me live?" Kvar thought silently for a few moments, then answered, "You look too smart for the average blood cloak, and smart people I can use. Also, I'm going to need some help getting off this planet. I haven't spent much time in the cities. My very expensive disguise was ruined when I showed my true self, and now I have no way to blend in. I stick out as a Drazian. There are no other similar races to me. Sometimes you just have to blindly trust people, or you'll never get anywhere." Uli thought it over. "You're right about sticking out, and it's likely to be a problem in Dreg. I don't know what will happen when these miners, traders, and rough folks see your white hair and height. Never mind the eyes." Uli hesitated for a moment, then decided to proceed. Is your regular self any good in a fight?" Don't expect any superpowers or that which you saw back there. I'm just an average person, capable of wielding and fighting most conventional weapons." Kvar paused, looked at Uli for a few seconds, then said, "While most our power lies in our intellect, and of course the other half of our mind that can command nature, we have little power over it while in our regular self. The ankh I wear magnifies my connection while I'm in passive mode. So I can perform a few magic tricks and the like, but nothing serious. Here, watch." Kvar moved over to one of the canvases, spread it out, then sat down in the center, cross-legged. He closed his eyes, and suddenly the canvas began to slide. "Impressive," said Uli. "Unfortunately, I only know how to connect and path into sand. I never got fully developed before the planet was destroyed." Kvar stood up, then closed his eyes. About 5 feet away, the sand began to move and lift upwards. Pretty soon, a perfect rectangle lay in the sand. "Whoa, that's a pretty neat trick." His eyes were still closed, then suddenly he opened them, and the sand fell away. A small object remained, Uli looked at Kvar. Go ahead, it's yours. Uli moved forward and stooped down to pick up the object. It was a very small version of a Drazian battlecruiser. The level of detail was such that it seemed to be an actual ship shrunk down to size. At first, Uli was afraid it would break under his touch, but he found that it was rock solid. The sand appeared to have melted into the ship. Curious, he pulled on the ship's forward guns to see if it would dislodge. To his surprise, it didn't budge. Excuse me an idea, Kvar muttered to himself. Wow, this is really... Uli stopped when he saw Kvar. The Drazian was kneeling nearby, holding the ankh in the sand with both hands. He was in a deep state of meditation. A thought entered Uli's mind. I could probably kill him right now while he's distracted, claim the reward on him, probably save my life in doing so. We don't have much of a chance surviving this. Why did I band with the Drazian anyways? They're extinct for a reason. Ah, fuck it. If death awaits me, then at least it will be interesting. And who the fuck am I to care about money? I'm probably one of the richest people in Drag, and on this planet for that matter. No, I don't know what this Drazian has planned, but he's a fucking wild card. A rogue in a universe built around order and a continuum of the status quo. All the odds are against him, but maybe, just maybe he can do something. In 5 to 10 years, he could be the last Drazian alive. If we can get off the planet, that is. Uli noticed that the sand in front of Kvar was beginning to glow a soft orange. Kvar's head snapped back, and his eyes opened, and he donned the ankh again. He gave Uli a sinister smirk, then thrust his arm into the sand. With little effort, he pulled out a strange V-shaped object. It looked like a glassy piece of amber. Towards one of the tips, there was a smooth part where Kvar placed his hand, while the rest looked sharp and slightly jagged. He leveled it on his hands and inspected it. I needed a weapon of my own. A sword just doesn't fit me, Kvar explained. He grabbed the ankh and went into meditation again. The bottom tip of the ankh began to glow. He took the ankh and burned a symbol of sorts onto the part where he placed his hand. Then he burned a matching symbol into his palm. Kvar winced, but kept going. Once he was finished, he shook his hand out and looked up at Uli. My last transformation gave me more understanding of my powers. I have a theory, Kvar said as he stood up and threw the V-shaped object. It flew out for a long ways in an arcing path. He put his hand out and the object flew straight back to it. I saw this object here once in Khaldun. They called it a boomerang. I added my own touch to it. I sand-forged it with the ankh. It should be indestructible and lighter than a sword. Normally, I have a very short range with my link, but with these modifications, it's a different story. Since it's made from sand, I have a stronger link to it. Then I connected it with my skin, magnifying the link so that it has a very long range. It should always come back. Kvar scanned the desert and found what he was looking for. Watch. See that brambler running over there? Then he flung the boomerang. It went flying at a tremendous speed towards the little creature. The sound of it chopping the air echoed back to them. The boomerang bit too far to the right and stuck in the sand, 10 feet from the brambler, who took off. Uli looked at Kvar and saw that his new tattoo was slightly glowing. Kvar frowned, then made a pulling motion with his hand, and the tattoo flashed. A second later, the boomerang was flying back towards him at full speed. Uli dove to the ground and ducked as the boomerang flew over his head. I guess it's going to take some practice to get used to, Kvar grinned. Uli looked at Kvar. I can fashion you a holster for that. Kvar raised his eyebrows. That'd be nice. I can create objects out of sand from my mind, but with my hands, well, not so much. That boomerang won't harm the relic. You know that, right? No weapon will pierce their armor, stated Uli. This isn't for the relic. It's for anyone who tries to slow us down. In case we get in a fight, what kind of weapons are on this planet? Asked Kvar. Only hand weapons, I believe. There isn't any gunpowder on this planet, so you don't have to worry about those primitive weapons. All Federation Class 3 powered weapons were taken off planet long ago. Great. Blades and blunt weapons I can deal with, grinned Kvar. Kvar walked out a bit and practiced throwing his boomerang, while Uli grabbed the supplies from the speeders and prepared camp. Kvar came back as the light completely vanished from the desert. Uli offered him a bit of food and chuckled. My name is Uli, by the way. Kvar looked towards Uli. Good night, Uli. Day 1 is behind us. I wonder what the future holds. Never have I been this close to death as I have been these past few days. A thick darkness enveloped the desert. The only light source, the stars, were blocked by heavy clouds. Uli stared out into the night, thinking, while Kvar snored away nearby. Meanwhile, 3 tall creatures marched onwards, unaffected by the darkness. Dreg, Khaldun. The Miners' Pit was a reputable establishment among the locals. It had stood the test of time and was the highest tavern in Dreg, built in the usual spiral architecture centered around the cones. The cones were massive structures, thick at the base and became thinner towards the top, which was usually up and into the clouds. The Miners' Pit wrapped itself around the cone and stood about 20 stories above ground. Most of the establishment was located inside a burrow. It had long ago been a failed mining attempt to see what the cones consisted of. That large cavern was now filled with bar stools, beer-covered tables, and drunk miners gambling away their daily wages. The success of the Miners' Pit was due to their partnership with Dreg Mining and Refining, which allowed workers to debit their drinks against their wages. A minecart rail system was constructed inside the cone, which is free of charge to workers, allowing them easy transportation up the enormous stone structure. Among the usual shouts and obscenities walked a confident man in a soft, imported brown-skinned jacket. 5 blades could be counted, strapped in various locations, with an axe hanging from his belt. He had long, dark hair that reached his shoulders, clean-shaven, dark eyes, and a smile that still contained most of its teeth. He was taller than the average population of the bar, but then again, he was a Sirak. He walked across the room to the creditor's cubby. Uli, good to see you again. It's been a while. Come to check on your sales? Inquired a friendly voice. The man behind the barred window was missing his left arm, leg, and the left side of his face was pockmarked and scorched. Hey, Till. It's good to see you. Yeah, let's have the report, returned Uli. All righty. Let's see. 3, 4, 6. Where is it? Oh, yeah, here it is. 7. 7 ropes sold while you were gone. That's a total of 65 credits. Not bad, huh? Most of these miners here don't see that in 3 months. Till, I'm making a withdrawal. How much do you want? All of it. All, exclaimed Till. Are you sure? It's dangerous to carry that much money around here. Are you making a big purchase? New speeder? A home, perhaps? We can broker the deal for you, replied the creditor. No, Till. I'll take it in hard currency. Till waited to see if he would go on and give a reason. All righty then. Let's see what you have. Let me go grab your account book. Till ran into the back room. While the creditor tallied his account, Uli surveyed the bar, taking note of who else was there. He saw Knuckleface, Bent Jimmy, and Fat Pete, but not the man he was looking for. Till finally came back into his small room, with little bricklets the size of cards. Here you go. 685 credits. Thanks, Till. Here, take 5 for being such a fine accountant. Gee, Uli, it's been a pleasure working with you. I hope you'll continue to use our services. Hey, Till, have you seen the old man around here at all? The old man? He's outside, looking out at the city, thinking, I guess, replied Till. Thanks a lot, Uli said as he set off to the outdoor seating, picking up a beer along the way. Uli searched around for a little bit and finally found the old man seated next to the balcony rail, looking over at the vast city below him. He looked to be over 50 years, which on Khaldun was pretty old. Uli took a seat across from him, pulling out a small packet and sliding it across the table. The man with the short, unkempt gray beard and long hair took the packet and opened it up. Then he pulled out a pipe from his overalls and scooped the contents of the pouch into it. He lit a match and puffed on the pipe. The old man relaxed a bit and gazed out into the sky. It was past noon, and the sun was over the clouds. 6 massive cone structures stood in Uli's field of vision. Scattered on the first 3 were a variety of housing establishments that were built up and wound around the cone's outer wall. The rich lived in the higher houses, but there were not many rich here on Khaldun. Only the few who owned and controlled the main mining establishments. Most of the rich and powerful had fled Khaldun. The city seemed worse than the last time he saw it. The buildings were run down and messy, and rough men and gangs scattered the streets. There weren't many women left on Khaldun. They had also fled. Those that were left, you didn't want to go near. There was rumored to be a convent outside the basin and on top of the great walls, but Uli had never seen it and wasn't sure if he believed in it. It was said that many of the good women on Khaldun banded together, moved out there, and became warriors or something of the sort. Uli had never been above the walls and had no idea what was up there. But he had been told it was just pure desert. Not even water existed up there. Some drunk had once told him that this area, the Great Basin as they called it, was once a body of water like an ocean, but the water had since dried up, and that's why everyone had moved down here to get it. The tall, dark-haired Sirak looked back at the old man, who was still puffing peacefully on the pipe. "I seek knowledge," Uli said. The old man looked at Uli for a few moments. He took a deep pull and then finally released the smoke. "It is good to seek knowledge," he replied. "I don't have time to lie to you or make up some story. In short, I'm working with the Drazian. The Relg are here. They're hunting him. Probably me by association. How the hell do we get off this planet?" The old man's eyes lit up. "A Drazian? A living Drazian? Where is he?" "I left him in the desert. He'd be spotted within seconds of entering the city." "His disguise was destroyed," replied Uli, anxious at the old man's curiosity. They both knew the reward for killing or capturing the Drazian. There isn't another smuggler ship for another 8 months. There is a ship in the graveyard that could perhaps be repaired and piloted out. Is he by any chance from the clan Verasimus?" asked the old man. "No, I don't think so. Why would that make any difference?" "Well, they were good with machines and devices. He could have been capable of repairing the ship's engine. Now he's more focused on the mind. He doesn't seem to be skilled with his hands. Besides, making an old ship space-worthy would take months. We need to get out of here this week," replied Uli, slightly frustrated. He had already thought of these things. "There is an observer here on Khaldun," said the old man. "That can't be a coincidence." "An observer? What the fuck is an observer doing here?" "I don't know. An archiver must have sent him for some task. Perhaps he was sent here to find the Drazian. One probably found a trace of this Drazian of yours and sent an observer here to interview him." "Did the archiver send the relic too?" asked Uli, not knowing much about how the observers and archivers worked. "No, the archivers don't answer to the Federation. They have immunity to observe whatever they wish, except, of course, the Federation themselves." "Okay, so the observer's here. Can he get us off planet?" Uli asked. "He had to get here somehow. The net is still in place, and they didn't use a ship. I would have heard of it coming in." "So what then?" "Gates. It has to be gate travel." "There's another gate on Khaldun?" "The only one I knew of was destroyed about 5 years ago." "There must be another one." "Archivers and observers are known to use gates as a primary means of travel." Uli thought it over for a few minutes. Gate travel. He knew about it, but never actually tried it. Operating a gate is very difficult and extremely dangerous. Only specialists could attempt it. Most known gate locations were under access-restricted controls. The ancient gate system required special scrolls for input codes to a connecting gate. Only the modernized Drazian gate system did not require scrolls. The Ray Lord Drasus was the chief overseer of the gate system, but after his death, all the Drazian gates suddenly stopped working. There are a couple gate systems still operable, like the Heiligen gates, which were the most prevalent throughout the universe. The archivers must be using one of those systems, the location of the Khaldun gate being a trade secret. "Where can I find this observer?" asked Uli. "He's somewhere in Dreg," replied the old man. "Huh. I think you're right. This may be our answer." "Wait. Let me come with you. I need to get off this godforsaken planet, even if it's back onto Federated territory. I would rather die there than this hell. After all we've been through and the help I've given you." Uli thought it over. "You get the observer here in 3 hours, and if you don't slow us down, you can come. It's all the same to me." "Give me 50 credits." The old man stuck out his hand. Uli took out one of the little bricklets he had just withdrawn, passing it across the table. The old man stood up and walked into the bar, still smoking his pipe. He hit a keg with a chunk of wood in a resounding bang. Everyone in the bar quieted and looked over towards the old man. "Oh, look, the hermit has come out of his shell," chewed a fat man with beer all over his chest. The old man held the 50 credit piece high in the air. "I'm going to give this 50 credit piece here to Till to hold on for a little bit. There's an observer here in Dreg. The man who brings him here in less than 3 hours gets to keep these 50 credits." The thugs, drunks, slobs, and casual bargoers sat for a few seconds, processing the information. The old man walked over to Till and handed him the 50 credit piece, then went back outside. At once, everyone bolted for the doors, pushing each other out of the way. The fat man barreled his way through the crowd. There were a few squawks and a couple obscenities. Someone asked what an observer was, but in a matter of 3 minutes, the bar was empty.